Today, I have the honor of interviewing Eugene S. Robinson, the author of this book, A Walk Across Dirty Water and Straight into Murderer's Row. This is his memoir. Go out and pick your copy up on Amazon or Booklist. Go and pick your copy up today.
Man, it's an honor to have you here, man. Seriously, like I'm jazzed. Like I really appreciate you like coming on my page, man. Like and even like us talking in the past and man, you know, I always try to make sure I'm getting you guys right when I'm doing the entries and stuff. So I appreciate you even looking at that and you know, if there correction needed be, like you let me know and just corresponding like you know, like in general, man, I really appreciate it. It's great to have you, man.
Hey, I live by the written word, so if I can write it down, I'm glad to. You know, and all these people say, I don't pay attention. Ah, bullshit. I can pay attention in the privacy of my home, and then I feel obliged to get involved. You know, so I think most recently you put up something about, oh, are there any Black Rock folks that we should be covering? I go, yeah, right here, right
That's
here I am.
right.
So I'm like, or like, what was that movie? Was Humphrey Bogart? Some movie says, hey, I like to talk, you know. So yeah,
Man.
yeah, put me on.
Man, it's an honor to have you for a gang of reasons. If I'm gonna give you a brief introduction because it would be long, so I'm gonna try to sum it up and we're gonna go over some stuff in the interview.
Okay.
Man, this brother is a Renaissance juggernaut. Like this brother does this dude, freaking not only a musician, but a poet, an artist, an editor, man, an author, a publisher, an actor, martial arts artist. Man, there's so many different things that Brother Eugene Robinson has been involved in and still rocking madness. I hope that was a good production.
Yeah. My favorite part
Man,
was the still, because you know you got lots of guys who are resting on laurels that they laid back in 1985. But as far as I'm concerned, it's like, where you been? You know, it's kind of like, actually, in a weird way, my feelings about every time Obama opens his mouth these days. I'm like, hey, bro, some of us are not multimillionaires. We're still in the fight. Hey, a
exactly.
little bit of help would be nice right now, you know. So
Yeah,
yeah. So, you know, so yeah, still, you know,
still.
that's like what they say right before they announce the undisputed heavyweight king and still champion, right? So
Yeah, man, you're a champion in more ways than one, man. Shoot, like, man, I have to ask you, and some of these questions might seem a little, man, I'm gonna just ask him anyway.
go ahead.
Man, like, what got you into like a lot of the things that you do? Like, I mean, that's kind of a weird question, but you do so many different things. First of all, what got you into music? Second of all, what got you into writing and just what you've done literally and like just I mean, it's more than just writing stuff. It's like lyrics, it's like poetry, it's like a lot of things that you're involved in. But I'm sorry.
Well, it's all daisy chained together, right? Because first was my mom teaching me how to read. And then once I started to read, it was like this kind of mind blowing thing of like, you know, anybody who can speak the language or can figure out a sentence can read anything. So I started
Mm,
reading. I started reading everything, and it didn't take too long before being exposed to that type of media where I go, you know what? I can now read. I bet I could write something. And I mean, one of the first things I ever saved was a query letter that I sent to Esquire. I must have been about 9 years old. I sent to
wow.
Esquire magazine trying to get some work, you know. So it was clear to me that people paid for this, that if you were good at it, you know, you could do something, and that it was interesting, right? You get my stepfather. I grew up with a stepfather who was a journalist. I remember him coming home talking about how great Chaka Khan was, or bringing me like home a signed Curtis Mayfield photo. You know, I'm like, and this is work. This is work. You go
That's
and
awesome.
they pay you for this. It was sort of, but even with that, it took me a long time to get my head around. I mean, I didn't go to college with the expectation that I was going to do this. I went to college with the expectation I was going to be a biologist, you know. And
Oh
then after
wow.
after I went through a chemistry class, I was like, yeah, you know what? Forget about this. I don't want to have to work this hard for the next 4 years. You know, I don't like it enough to justify it. So, and then bumped along for a couple of years until I met a professor, Bill Rivers, who I thanked in the acknowledgments in A Long Slow Screw, my novel, who said, I don't know what you're thinking about doing for a living, but you should do magazines. And that was the first time anybody had ever said, this is what I think you should do based on your skill set. So, but already at that point, when he said that, I was already doing music, because again, I was exposed to it and understood the methodology and said, I could express myself in this. And I don't, Sly Stone didn't have years of vocal training, right?
Yeah.
He just
That's
decided he
right.
wanted to get up and sing, right? He just did it, So I decided, yeah, well, why can't I just do it? I've seen plenty of, at the point where I was 19, I'd seen plenty of bands that sucked. I could easily do it
Man.
better than they are, right? So why not? And I've been on stage forever. I mean, my first thing was I was Gertz's Baby of the Year, when I was 2 years
Wow.
old. And then I was like the fir tree and the little fir tree. And then I was a father in with the Sound of Music. I mean, I'm musical theater from the time probably until I got to high school, because then I decided that I hated theater kids and didn't want to have anything to do with them. So, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot to mention journalism, and you've written for like GQ, Wire, LA Weekly, Vice,
New
Decibel,
York Times. Yep.
man, New York Times, man, dude, a
Yeah.
lot. And I know you worked for Ozzy for a bit, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I should mention that or not, but
Yeah, you can mention. I'll answer anything. I'll talk about anything. I do not care. Yeah, Ozzy was a trip. Yeah, if you don't know how much of a trip, just go to Google right now and type in Ozzy scandal, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
I found out a little bit, kind of recapping some of the things that I'd written about you before, and I'm like, oops. And I almost was gonna stay away from that, but like I'm like, well, heck, you were a part of not the scandal, obviously, but a part of what they were doing and stuff, like creatively and stuff. So you've done a lot of great things, man. Like just and Revolver, all those different. There's a lot of magazines that you've written for, like
Yep.
man.
Code Magazine was one of my favorites. It was initially these guys from Manifest came out west and pitched it. They had done some great research and found out that the majority of GQ readers were men of color. And so they came up with a magazine that focused exclusively on that 66% of GQ readers, men of color, called Manifest. And they pitched it to Larry Flint. Well, of course, it's Larry Flint. So he just stole the idea. I didn't know this until much later. Stole the idea, hired some people from Condé Nast. These people from Condé Nast went to their AA meeting, and at their AA meeting say, hey, you know any like really good black guys who are editors? And somebody who happened to be at the AA meeting goes, yeah, I know Eugene. And so they flew me down and they put me in charge of Code Magazine. So that was a good year plus of hard work, like interviewing Halle Berry and Chris Rock, and Lawrence Fishburne and Samuel Jackson. I was suffering under the weight of all that.
That's so cool, though, man.
Yeah. It was pretty fun.
Man, and I did mention Decibel for someone that said that in the audience. I thought I'd mentioned it.
Yep.
But man, that's so cool, though, man. Like seriously, man.
Well, Decibel was funny too, because I was in there writing pieces for them. And then apparently, like I'm an East Coaster. I'm from New York originally. And the editor-in-chief was getting married. And I said something like, it's your funeral, brother. And he took like offense. And so they like stopped working with me for years. And I was like, I'm not going to apologize, because you should have understood it was comedic. But then they called after George Floyd. I got a call. And they said, could you please? I was like, yeah, I'm glad to. I don't, I'm not a... Well, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a grudge holder, but I'm not, not a professional. Well, I'd be lying if I said I was not a professional. Let me put it this way. I'm willing to let bygones be bygones sometimes,
Man, well, you talked about musical theater as a kid. As far as like bands and stuff, what was your first band? Was it Whipping Boy, or was there any bands before that when you were in New York and stuff like that?
No, I had one band before where I played saxophone, and it was called Al and the X's, and I was not the singer. The singer was Al X. And we had figured out that we figured out a couple of things. And one of the things I figured out is that if you're black and you have a saxophone, people people are willing to you can walk in anywhere and people are willing to they think, oh shit, something cool is about to happen. So we had about 3 or 4 shows where we just walked into places and started playing, you know. And it became pretty clear after a few minutes that we didn't know what we're doing. Like, it was like horrible, no wave
I
skronking
love that
saxophone.
stuff.
But
That's sick.
and at one point, they tried to turn. It was like when the coffee shop to do it. They tried to turn up the ambient music, and I remember jumping up on a table and playing along to the really loud ambient music, because also saxophone is visual. Like, you don't have to hear what I'm doing for me to have a great time. So that they just figured, we got to ride this out. It never got the cops called on us, but it was definitely gave me a taste of what it was that I wanted to do. And I had started drawing little pictures after that of me on the stage with other musicians, and started to kind of evince this idea that a band is something that needed to be started. So
sick, man. Were you giving James Chance a run for his money?
exactly. Heavily influenced by James Chance. And the weird, scary thing, it's lasted about 3 months or 4 months. The weird thing is, actually, at the end of 4 months, I got fairly competent on the sax, which I was like, man, I should keep this up. But, didn't happen.
Any tapes or videos or demos? I'd love to hear that. I like a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, me too. I would have. If I could track down Al X, I'm sure he's got it. But tracking down Al X is like tracking down Hitler or something. He's very hard to find. I have no idea where to start with that guy. So,
man. So with that, and it ties into the one thing, New York versus San Francisco punk scene. Like, as far as like the early, from what I understand, you were there from the beginning. Like, how was it being in New York, especially like in the late 70s and early 80s? And I saw you in that Bad Brains. I think you pointed it out. That Bad Brains video, dude, that was the baddest freaking. You were raging in that pit.
I mean, it was electrifying. I got to, they start with the long lead up to, I think, I don't know, maybe it was At the Movies, a long lead up to that, whatever it was. It was just, you lose your mind. It was really beyond. So no, I'm sorry. So what your question was? What music? Well, yeah, I was in that Bad Brains thing. That was 3 nights. It was Christmas Eve, Christmas, and the day after Christmas.
Wow.
Which essentially meant that you were seeing 3 hours of Bad Brains, and you actually got to see them develop their set over 3 days, right? Because they weren't going to duplicate what they had done before. They weren't going to play the same set. So you got the full experience. Like, one night was much more heavily reggae influenced. Jerry Williams, who recorded the demo tape for RIR, was there. I mean, everybody, the guy from who's the guy? Michael Giro was there. I've seen photos later and looked and go, oh shit, look what it is. And the dude
from the Swans?
Yeah, he was way before the Swans. He was just there in the audience. And then the guy from the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Dickie Barrett. He was there. So it was like, later on, of course, Jimmy Gestapo was there before he was. Well, he used to be called Jimmy Gestapo. Now he's whatever his real last name is. He's changed it to. So from Murphy's Law, Dave Dichter was there before. He had to fall out with the Bad Brains and so on.
Wow.
So it was Sam from Fang was there. It was a pretty phenomenal night of East Coast and West Coast. But my lights in East Coast, I was ignored at different times for different reasons. Like in the East Coast, I was a high school kid, didn't have the cool clothes, couldn't afford the cool leather jacket. That was my big get before I got out of high school, saving my money but getting my leather jacket from Hudson's. So I was just like a bridge and tunnel kid at the shows, which gave me a lot of freedom. People just left me alone. This is well before the Bad Brain show. We're talking 78, 79. And but California, I've always said that California is just weird racially. It's just a strange place because there's no black middle class here, right? So there is, but they're like in denial and hiding or something. I don't know what the story is. So I wasn't invisible like I was in New York, but it was being ignored in a different way. which was fine by me, because if you don't have anything to sell, it's okay not to be noticed as a salesperson, right? I was fine. Once I got into a band, though, it became something that, definitely what you're saying is putting down a tile for a shingle for wanting to be noticed, and that happened. It happened. We were up and at it, not willing to let California determine our fate by touring as soon as we could humanly possible do so, which I think was 1980, 82. 82 was our first tour. Well, so we started playing shows aggressively in 81, and by springtime of 82, we were already on the road touring.
How was the vibe like? Especially, it's funny, you're in the first wave of the punk thing, like in the in the late 70s, but also the earlier part of the hardcore thing, and it's a trip. Like, everyone makes a distinction now. Even like when I got into punk, which was probably late 80s, early 90s, we were all still punks, if anything. But I mean, hardcore was, I guess, kind of different. I didn't know that at the time. We just liked what we liked. But coming from that back then and seeing it develop, would you say that there was a new energy with the hardcore versus like the original punk scene, or was there things that were more limiting?
Well, what started to happen is, and this was sort of refreshing, because all the people that gave me the high hand in 77, 78, the numbers of those people that rode it through to hardcore were, let's say percentage wise, were maybe like 10%. 10% of those people, which means 90% of the people who were going to shows in 77 had either decided to yield to financial blandishments and go the way of Blondie, Talking Heads, like, oh shit, there's money that could be made here. Devo, you remember, was huge at the time. So they either went that way and started to do the more marketable new wave, or they seriously fucked off. They just left, right? And one of my most memorable scenes is going to a club, I think it was Danceteria, to see either Channel 3 or Agent Orange. And Doug Holland got us in for free. We were there with Whipping Boy, and I don't know what he said to the guy, like, these are their friends from California, you gotta let them in. And so we got into the show, and so all these kind of 77, 78-year-old punks were on the floor trying to do some version of pogoing, and the kids who were in the hardcore weren't having it. They were just like moshing, right? And at one point, one of the older guys kind of like said something to Harley, and I remember watching with great interest. Harley, shirtless Harley, all 5'5" of him, however tall he was, got right in this guy's chest and was like, "What the fuck are you gonna do?" And that was pretty much what that first class, the 77, 78ers, what they had to deal with. And a lot of them just left. You had a few that stuck around, like Thurston Moore, because he figured out how to do the Blondie thing, but without doing Blondie music, he could actually make money with Sonic Youth, and still was enough of a music lover that he was there with the hardcore thing. I mean, he wasn't at all the Sunday matinees and stuff like that, but he was certainly part of that scene and participated and knows a lot of the same people. And so that was maybe three ways of approaching it. But the 90% that just fucked off, and the 45% that became new waivers, and then the 45% that made the journey over to hardcore, it made for an interesting melange. Like all those guys in San Francisco, Crime and the City Solution, the bands that had been here before I got here. By the time I got here, they were well gone.
Wow, Pink Section, the Mutants, all those bands.
Pink Section. Matt Heckert's a friend of mine. Matt Heckert from Pink Section, and he joined up. By the time I knew Matt, he had already moved on and was doing the industrial culture thing with SRL, Survival Research Labs. So that's what happens, and that's the same sort of breakdown. They either fucked off completely, or they, tried to make a lot of money, like Deborah Ayal with Romeo Void or so on, which, did make some money. Or they went another path, which is to stay hardcore. And I don't mean necessarily hardcore music. Survival Research Labs, man, was and still is kind of the shit in terms of independent, power industrial, force projection. They're great. I love those guys.
Man, how did Whipping Boy form? Like, when you moved to San Francisco, was it for that reason or for a different reason?
No, I came out to go to school.
Oh, okay.
I came out to go to Stanford, and I just stayed. I always thought, well, I want to go to college in some place where I'd want to visit. And that way I can get my visit in. And if I don't, if I don't like it, I'm going to go back home. Well, I never thought I would stay out here this long. I always thought I would be going back home. So it never happened because 10 years ago, I realized the New York that I left doesn't exist anymore. Right. Chris,
Yeah, I
actually,
have family that tell me the same.
in a weird turn, it was Chris Rock when I interviewed him, I was like, oh man, I miss it. He's like, you don't miss it. What do you mean? That's I just said. He goes, the teenager in you misses it. And I was like, oh shit, he's right. He's right. He's like, at the time I interviewed him was maybe I was 50. He goes, the 50-year-old man in you doesn't want to be mugged. I was like, yeah, I guess maybe, but so
That's a trip, man.
yeah.
Man, so like forming Whipping Boy, like, and then from that to Oxbow with some of them. What was the thing? Now, one of the things that I always hear is like hardcore just got played out at some point, and cats just wanted to do different things. You've heard. I mean, I've heard like Black Flag. I've heard like a lot of other bands. Why Die like changed their style. A lot of people either went glam or they went straight up metal or very experimental. Was it the same with like you guys and just direction wise, creatively?
Well, there were a couple of things that happened. A couple of things. I started to listen to the Birthday Party. I started to listen to the Butthole Surfers, and then I also started to actually pay attention to what I was writing. Right? And like the lyrics that you find on an Oxbow song on the first record, Fuckfest, are lyrics that I would have been hard pressed to make work in the Whipping Boy format. So I thought about this for a long time. Like, why did I not stay? Why did I? And it was like the guys in Mech Mensch, Crusties, Killdozer. There were always bands who were around that were slightly different off of the doctrinaire hardcore thing, who I paid attention to and really liked. And then it got like Jesus Lizard, who had been Scratch Acid, and I was like, all of a sudden, it was like a thing. And I was listening to that thing, and lyrically, it seemed to better accommodate what I want to say in the lyrics. And I knew that this was something that was going to happen when a guy who had listened to a Whipping Boy record a guy who I liked, came to me and said, the problem are your lyrics. And I go, how's that? And he goes, you have to address the issues that really address, the average person who listens to your music, a California high schooler. I said, what? Yeah, these kids are getting beaten up by guys in Ben Davis pants and derby jackets, which I'm wearing a derby jacket now. You just have to. And I was like, how bankrupt is it? I got no emotional connection to California high schools. And so that's when the idea, that and the fact that my life was collapsing in every other regard, is what got me to think about starting to do something else. And initially, like I've said, fuck was supposed to be a suicide note. So I thought I'm done. So fortunately, the fact that Fuckfest was so well received, actually ego saved me. I was like, well, maybe I should go to England, because England was the first place that wanted to see us play. Maybe I should go to England first before I die. So
Heavy, man.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're still here, man. And it's a trip for probably people that are dealing with that. And maybe it's something that would help them cope with even not doing something like that, because, people call it a lot of the stuff that I'm into, like a lot of different kinds of music as well, especially like more of what people might consider anger or really experimental, out there noise, whatever you call it, or just avant-garde, crazy changes, all that stuff. There's a lot of things that people will kind of demonize with this kind of dissonant music, but they don't realize that some of that, a lot of it, if anything, is something as a coping thing to a lot of people. Like it really helps. What's the word that I'm looking for? It helps. It's like a cathartic moment where you're expressing your own self. yeah, I mean,
They've done studies at this point that prove that's proven out based on studies. You know that that this music is actually one bit of information I got from my piece of crap father was he was talking about the connection between slavery and music,
mm,
and how that this was a great salve. You know, it was a great saving grace. And now they've done studies to find out, of course, that it is the case. It helps you get through hard times, definably so. So yeah, yeah, it helped. You know.
yeah, you know, even with our culture, like a lot of the music that people are even enjoying, pop music, especially what we're talking about, rock and roll, it was born out of those hard times, you know,
Yep.
and it's a trip how, you know, I have a lot to say about that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a trip just to see how like how many different forms of that we as you know a culture have made
Mm-hmm.
to the point where it's just like for me I can't say it's lost in definition at all because of what I even do with this page.
Mm.
But there's a lot of things that I think that still need to be considered when it comes to that, you know, and like just the struggle that went into that and our culture and legacy, you know, when it comes to slavery and a lot of the things that we went through even after that, that still is showing up in a lot of our music, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, what I always liked it was Leroy Jones. So I in my memoir, I have a funny, you know, a funny relationship to Leroy Jones, also known as Amiri Baraka, who's now passed on. But he
Yeah.
wrote this play, The Dutchman, and in it there's like a monologue that the character gives, the black character gives. And he's like, when Billie Holiday was singing, and he goes, Louis Armstrong was playing. What do you think they were saying? They were saying, "Fuck you." Yeah,
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I've never forgot that as a channel to pick up and carry this like negativity and just put it on outside the door by means of something you could buy. Yeah,
Yeah.
talk about
Yep.
yeah, that's the way we do it. So
Reminds me of Charlie Parker, and I think it was Coco. Well, the reason bebop was invented because people was, you know, they didn't want us to, you know, have anything to do with them. But yet, I mean, cats were going in the Cotton Club, the back of the Cotton Club, and still treated like
mm,
trash. Yet they wanted the music. But Charlie's like, you know what? I'm gonna let you. You gonna hear today instead of just like be dancing
yep,
and aimlessly not care about my voice. I'm gonna give you my voice. We're gonna speed this
yep,
thing
yep,
up. It's punk rock to
yep.
me. We're gonna speed this
Yeah,
thing up, and
yeah,
you're gonna listen.
100%, 100%. So yeah, there are elements of that, but yeah, I mean that's no. I mean, for me at the creation of Oxbow was more just I'll show you, but again I always find it amusing that it was ego that saved me. Like, well,
Man,
I gotta go to England. I got what kind of person would I be if I've never been to London? So we flew over and did the first Oxbow shows over there. So I don't know.
man, and I mean, it's to me. I look at that stuff as like it's funny. You hear about scrams and like some of the like what do you call that? Like some of the metalcore bands and stuff, and scrams like the you know the real screamo, as some people would
Yep.
call it. And I could hear like that preceding that stuff. Like even though you guys definitely, I mean, you did stuff. It's like it reminds me of like what the Swans did when they tried to do their Johnny Cash thing. I mean, but it was its own thing. I'm not comparing y'all
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
Swans, but you know
yeah,
what I'm saying. It's like
yeah,
it was so no one knew like it would be hard for anybody to just like know where you're going to go
yeah.
next, and that's the intensity and the tense thing that you guys do with Oxbow.
Yeah, well, that's why I always like Aaron Turner from Sumac's commentary. He was like, not what I expected, but everything I'd hoped for. And as an epigram, I think for Oxbow, that was pretty cool. Because if anybody could say that they have seen, there's only like one or two people I know who actually saw Love's Holiday coming, and one was a critic who described my voice on the Narcotic Story as crooning. Which means
Mm.
I'd already done 5 records where I was using more and more of my actual voice, and nobody had noticed. So one guy, Nick Blakey out in Boston, described "She's a Find" as me crooning through it, and I was like, one person realized I'm actually finally singing to the point that I can put out "Love's Holiday," and it doesn't sound jarring to people's ears. Like, what the fuck are they doing? It doesn't sound like that. So
It's funny for me because I'm into that stuff.
Yep,
I could hear all you on so many different
yep,
levels. Like it's like basically I could hear, even with what people might consider like jarring or chaotic, I could still hear that crooning.
Yep.
I could hear a bunch of things, like even almost Paul Robeson type
Yep.
stuff. You know, like you have a lot of different things that you're doing. And some people might just be a little bit like you're definitely playing with a lot of dissonance in your own right.
Yep.
You're doing
Yep.
both. You know?
Well, and that's the funny thing too, that like, you know, rock and roll has done a great disservice to vocalists, right? Because it's like, because the vocalist is no longer a vocalist, the vocalist becomes a front person,
Yeah.
right? And at that point, you know, oh, he rubs crap on his body like Gigi Allen. Oh, Gigi Allen's a vocalist. Gigi Allen's a front man, right? You know, I'm more an actual vocalist. So when I listen for music that I like, are people, vocalists, who actually have some sort of musical understanding and are doing compelling things with their voice. Like when I hear James Hetfield go, yeah, I know as a vocalist that he just forgot what to do. He's got no idea what to do there. It's like, I don't know, maybe put some pepper in it. Maybe that'll help out. You know, it's really empty to me, you know. But when I just listened to, what band did I listen to? And I was two bands, Cattle Decapitation and Chat Pile. And I was like, these are actually vocalists who are paying attention, like, to their vocals in a serious way. So I end up liking them. So
Sick. You're definitely an amazing front man too. Like it's like what Peter Gabriel would do, you know, with his voice, and also like what he would do with Genesis and stuff. I'm not comparing you on that. You're totally different. I'm just saying that there's you know, you still have a presence even when you're performing. Just videos that I've watched, you know,
yep.
And also your voice. So it's really cool. Now I have to ask you this.
Go ahead.
There's a bunch of questions. Who are your favorite musicians, including the vocalists, and who are your favorite performers, or even both at the same time, and if not musical and non-musician wise?
Well, over the course of time in the hardcore world, and I only say this because there are actual photos of me, and you can see, if you track down the photos, you can see me. I'm not just a guy in the audience enjoying the band, but the look on my face is I'm studying. And there's a picture of me at a Minor Threat show.
Oh wow!
But that whole night, there are a few seats. Reagan Youth opened up, and Dave, the singer, Dave Insurgent, was a friend of mine, and I thought he was a phenomenal front man. You look at me watching him, and I'm actually like I'm like analytically approaching what it is that he's doing. I'm not just caught up in the music. Same after the initial burst of seeing the Bad Brains 3 nights in a row, I became a big student of HR's. I mean, to like dissecting everything he did and the reasons why and how they approached it, and the whole kind of structural and rhythmic dynamics. So HR, I don't think that there is a band. There's certainly not a band that came from that period that could beat them. You know, there's not. The big mystery for me is why hardcore, and I'm sure some of the UK folks could answer this. Why hardcore? I think I have my own theories why hardcore didn't take off in England. It's now. You have hardcore bands in England now. They finally felt comfortable adopting it, but I think hardcore was so deeply earnest that, you know, Brits, who are usually, you know, taking the piss out of things and don't take themselves as seriously, as just didn't see invest in that kind of energy. It seemed very American and very kind of comical to them. Like Black Flag had a hard time over there. Bad Brains, when they went over to the UK, they were not well received.
Oh wow!
Yeah, for different reasons. I would like to imagine that they were not well received in the UK because of their reggae. Because in the UK you had really great reggae, and Bad Brains reggae, it was okay. It wasn't super great. So they're like, during the reggae sections, like, what is this? And then of course they were never tuned into hardcore for the other sections anyway. So Black Flag didn't have a good time there, you know. Bad Brains didn't really. I mean, any TSOL, any of the Minor Threat, any of the American bands, they didn't have. You know, it wasn't until you had bands like GBH, Anti Nowhere League, that you had like some variation, discharge, some variation for
Subhumans.
Subhuman's response to American hardcore. So, but HR, outside in total, you know, a lot of the baritones, like Johnny Hartman, you know, Eckstein, John Lucien. I love these guys. And Arthur Prysock, great vocalist. Like, you know, could create whole structures out of voice. Cleo Lane, who I actually tracked down her husband John Dankworth, because he did a lot of compositional stuff on some of my favorite movies, and I got a hold of him through Tim Love-Lee and was almost about to, and then he died. I was like, man, if you want to work with somebody, you got to get on it fast. You can't dawdle, you know. So these are some of my favorite musicians. Peter Brotzman, I remember seeing him.
Oh,
yeah, I remember seeing.
Cool.
Yeah,
I love that.
I remember seeing him well before we played with him in Moores, and I was like, man, I would love to do something with this guy. And as luck would have it, it happened. I mean, that was, you got to know that
I
that was
didn't
a
know
high.
that.
Oh, at the Moores Festival in 2018, and we just put out a record of it called The Eternal Power of Not Today, I think is what it's
I
called.
gotta hear that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
gotta hear that.
Well, of course, because then he died, you know. So I mean, which is really weird to have somebody you're emailing back and forth about stuff, and the next day they're dead, you know. So, but he was in his 80s, and you
When did
know,
Peter die? I didn't know. I saw him with Casey Hino like a few years ago.
no,
That's crazy.
I think he died in the last 8 months, you
Oh
know.
wow,
So,
man.
yeah, he was having health issues of not COVID related, but just generalized health issues. But when
Wow.
he played with us, man, it was just, that power from the horn. It was still there. So yeah, the record is great. The record, the Eternal Reminder of Not Today, is a great record, and Aaron from Sumac did the art for it. So you know, a lot of these, a lot of these performers I've taken from their focus, you know, their desire to deliver as front people. I've taken a lot, and you know, there are a lot of bands I like that, you know, I like a huge tranche of hip hop, which people don't consider, but it's mostly because as a transplant New Yorker, I was into hip hop. The first guy I was friends with that was doing hip hop was Jimmy Spicer, also known as Dollar Bill. This is when he
Rest in
was.
peace, man.
Oh
Oh,
shit! Did he die?
yeah. Jimmy passed, I think, maybe 2 years ago. He did the Dracula voice. Right? What's the name of that one where he's super how can I forget the name of that song? Because that's the song that I first heard by him. Yeah, Jimmy
Oh,
Spicer,
Dollar
man.
Bill, y'all, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So, well,
man.
we worked together. I was a lifeguard at a kids camp, and he was a counselor. And he was like, "Yo, Eugene, I can make anything rhyme." I go, "What is this thing?" He goes, "This is called hip hop." In fact, I stole one of his rhymes for the second Whipping Boy record, "My Day at the Lake." You know, I laid the plan for Spider-Man. I put the S on Superman's chest, wrestled with Hercules, and swam across the seven seas. You know, so. But it always, for me, my initial attraction to hip hop was as a transplanted New Yorker. I would get nostalgic for the city, and it was so much New York that that's how I start listening, you know. And then some people changed my head around. I remember talking to some guy in the midst of my hardcore phase, and he was telling me about Prince, and I was like, you know, I don't know, man. And my girlfriend at the time had been hanging out with the Time in Minneapolis. She was like some runaway. And so, I was like, God, what are these guys? These guys are just guys in bands like me working a hustle, whatever. Okay. I wasn't a fan until something happened. I don't know what record they turned me in, and I was like, "Oh my God, this guy's a genius! Like an actual like real genius." You're like not just making believe he's a genius. And so then I completely turned. But I have a bad prognostication record. Like I told the Beastie Boys when they called me and told me they were kicking out Suzanne or whatever, the drummer. I can't remember her name. The girl drummer from the hardcore band. I said, "What do you
Katie,
guys get?" Yeah, what's her name? I don't remember
Kate
now.
Skellenbach.
Yeah, Kate. Yeah. When they kicked out Kate, they said, "Yeah, we're gonna." I said, "Well, what are you guys gonna do now?" This is a phone call where people used to make such things. Go, "Oh man, we're gonna do hip hop," and I was like, "You're never gonna make it." Never gonna make it. I guess I was wrong about that with
Man,
the Beastie Boys.
what a
But
trip.
but shit, this was in 1981 and 82. It was preposterous. I remember Rick Rubin talking to me by 2+2, which is at Houston and Second Avenue. I got LL Cool J, and man, we're going up to Latin Quarter, and we're gonna be huge. I'm doing it out of my room, it's my dorm room, and I'm like, man, you're never gonna make it either.
Look at him now.
I actually, it's not like I thought this. This is hardcore days. I said it.
Yeah.
So that's
That's
very,
so
very,
funny.
very amusing to me that these guys have aggressively. I'm super happy for them. I'm glad that they've done as well as they have. You know, so
Man,
they were all good people. So that much I have to say.
man, you mentioned composers of Brosman, and it made me think of Felipe Petit.
Oh,
Is he related to the daredevil Felipe
nah,
Petit by any
no,
chance?
I don't. I think they're related. Not related. He started out as a promoter for shows that we were doing in Marseille, and then he started asking me to do stuff for him, like vocals and for different records, and it actually worked out very nicely. Um, Sadly, that ended when I when I asked him for $300. I'm like, he goes, I got the new record. It's ready to go. It was part of a trilogy or something. And I go, great. I want to do vocals with Shannon Shelberg from the Cows. And he's like, okay. So you either have to give me some money to fly me there to record with him, or give me a plane ticket so he could come out and record at this cheap studio that that I work do vocals for here. And he goes, how much is it going to cost? I go, $300. He's like, well, it's never happened. It's like, bro, you don't work and you got a nice apartment in Marseille and we put out 6 records together. He goes, I'm not ripping you off or anything. I was like, you said that. I didn't say that.
Hey,
You can't give me $300, then I guess we're done here, man.
man,
So that was kind of a sad day, but I did enjoy all those records. But I really, really wanted to finish the record the last one that he gave me. But if I
wow,
can't get $300 to get Shannon out here, I'm not going out of pocket to help you stay in your apartment. you know.
I hear you, man.
Yeah.
Man, so tell us about Birth of Tragedy magazine and like even the recordings. That was interesting. Like that's something that you published back in the early 80s from what I understand.
Yeah. That was I remember dragging a table, found a table in some conference room, and just dragged it through campus, and then put it out in White Plaza, and sat down at the table, and made a sign, a handwritten sign, where I stole a lyric from the Dead Kennedys. Ever want to die? Of course you have. And I put the magazine on the table, Birth of Tragedy magazine, and sold a lot. Like I talk about in the memoir, I sold a lot that first day. The second day, people read it and came back, and they were very angry with me.
Why?
It was the issues were all themed, and so the first one was sex and depression, and they were, I guess they weren't ready to handle all that sex and depression. So yeah, people stopped talking to me as a result of that. But that was my desired end. I'm not. I guess you wanted something nice, and that's not good, something you're gonna get here. So fuck off, please. Thank you. So Birth of Tragedy, and that was also, I mean, the first issue. I got to interview Black Flag, right? Because depression, if it made sense in my mind, they had the big song Depression, and they were kind of jerks to me. But that's because they didn't think I was actually going to follow through. I didn't have a tape recorder or anything. I was taking notes, right, like old style. But of course, later when they started SSD started advertising with us, they recalled remembering that interview, and it was like, yeah, we kind of came across as jerks. They go, you did that to you. I didn't do that to you. You did it. You didn't take me seriously. So, but anyway, yeah, that was a great magazine to have. I have the film here and still periodically think about releasing it all as a book. Though you can still find dribbles and drabs, like this Church of Satan still has up on their site the interview I did with LaVey. And so different. Rene Girard, his piece was out there somewhere on some site as well. So it still exists in one form or another.
Didn't you put like out a compilation that had Anton LaVey and
Yeah,
like Bella Biafra and Rollins and Lady Lunch on there
yeah.
too, and Marion Faithful?
Marion Faithful was on the Oxbow Records Serenade in Red. She
Oh,
was
my
not on.
bad. Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
she was not on Fear. It was called Fear Power God. It was released on white vinyl and in America, and then black vinyl in the UK and Europe, and then Black House Records in Idaho released it on CD, and then I doubled back and also released it on cassette tape because I thought, well, why not? And it did really. The only other spoken word out at the record at the time was Freeway Records, Harvey Coopernick in L.A., and he had done one. And as far as I know, and John Journo had done one, and mine was like the third. So it benefited from being early on in the mix. It sold enough so that I felt guilty and paid everybody, with the exception of Manson, because you can't pay Manson because of the victims compensation laws. So, and anyway, the way he got me his tape was completely illegal. Anyway, I mean, he got to me through his lawyer, but he was not supposed to be in prison releasing music. They were not into that.
That's a trip. I mean, even the lineup on, like, I remember just seeing like the lineup on that, and I was like, how on earth did he get? How did that even happen? You know, like I'm like, what? You know,
Hey,
and
well, I'm packing up my stuff because I'm planning to leave this country at the end of next year, go to Spain. But packing up my stuff, I'm going through. It's like, man, who's sending me all these John Wayne Gacy letters? Why the hell do I have these? And I go, oh yeah, John Wayne Gacy sent them. That's why. But of course, he had his paintings, so we were talking about his paintings and for an interview. And at that point, when he was still alive, he was trying to do anything that might kind of help his public image. So he was, his game, like writing. I mean, I'm glad to meet him over mail. I don't know that I'd like to meet him in his basement, but over mail was fine.
Man, that's heavy, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, shoot, man, there's what's the band? There's two things. A few bands. You mentioned Dead Kennedys. What Dead Kennedy song are you on?
Chicken Farm.
Oh,
Down to the chicken farm with Gary Floyd from the Dicks, who was also then in Sister Double Happiness, and I think one more song that his name I can't remember. I blocked it out. my history with Biafra is a troubled one. So,
sorry.
No, it's like the guy's kind of a prick, kind of a little bit of a prick. That's all I wanted. Like. I see he's called as a message. Biafra called. I go, cool. So I call him back, and we're talking, and then finally he says to me in the middle of the conversation, "Hey, what do you want?" I go, "You first of all, you don't talk to me that way. Second of all, what do you mean? What do I want? You called me." He goes, "Did I?" I go, "Fuck, are you drinking?" "Yes, you called me. I have a message here that you called me. Otherwise, I don't call you. What do you want?" And he goes, "Oh, I thought I was calling Eugene Chadbourne." You know what, man? Go fuck yourself with this. I don't need this. I don't need this. Come on. This is not high school. So anyway, recently he said he's boycotting having me on his show because I'm a member of the NRA. So, yeah, well, besides which I'm not. So, I mean, I had a federal firearms license, and used to buy and sell guns, but it's a protected constitutional right?
Yep. Man, a few other band questions. So sorry, I have a gang of them. And are we doing good on time? I know you had to.
Yep.
Okay. The band Blackface with Chuck Dukowski. I've met Chuck a few times. Really cool guy. He actually is a friend of mine. I always ask him about this other cat named Lynn Johnston, who I've played music with. I think Lynn's played with like Red Crayola and a few other people, but he was in Lynn's band. I mean, I'm sorry, Lynn was in his band, right. And he was always really cool. But I've never heard that project that y'all had. Like,
well, the idea was to record all of the Black Flag songs that he had written that hadn't been done in a Black Flag format. And he's the one who suggested the name, and I thought the name was genius because we could make the connection really easily, quickly, using the same typography. And with me as a singer, it gave it a special sort of resonance. But then it immediately kind of got weird. Like, why is Ian Mackay suddenly holding forth, telling Chuck, I wouldn't use that name. I think it's bad. Mr. Guilty of Being White is suddenly shitting on my bad name, suggesting to Chuck that we change it to Black Velvet. I go, these are completely different things. These are not at all the same things, and then Chuck getting like, well, man, I don't know this is real. I don't think it's real. So I got us a support gig for Iggy Pop at the Off Festival in Poland, where for an hour of music, they were going to pay us like $19,000. And he was like, well, that's not enough money. I was like, what? Who else is giving you this guy? He goes, I just can't do it. I just can't do it, Eugene. I was like, you know what? Anytime somebody's tried to dump me, I never question it. I never ask. So It's okay. You don't
Man.
want to do it. Yeah. Yep.
So who, man, I'm sorry about that. What's the
No,
band?
I still love Chuck. You know, he was like my favorite Beatle. Chuck was my guy, and he's still my guy. So whatever, I understand.
Man, how was it collaborating with you? And also, I don't know if it's Shushu or Zuzu.
Ju-
But
Juju.
yeah, it's like a Chinese,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
how was it collaborating with those two groups?
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, Jamie is a great friend of mine, and Jamie and Angela from Juju, great, great friends. I really like them. You know, I was glad they sought me out when they did and put me on some K Records thing that they were doing with tea, chocolate, and wine. Zoo, same thing. You know, I maybe they even played with us, opened for Oxbow years ago, and had done a soundtrack for a horror movie. And the horror people were like, "This is too scary. We're not going to use it." But they paid for it all, so they were like, "What are we going to do with this?" They were like, "Hey, maybe have Eugene sing it." They had already done something with Mike Patton, and so they said, "No, not Mike. Eugene would be good for this." So they got me to sing on it, the left hand path, and it's such a great record. I really enjoyed it. It didn't, and then we did one show on it. We did one show on it at this festival in France. They flew me over, like they picked me up at the airport. It was 4 hour drive from the airport to the venue. Sound checked, did the show, put me back in the vehicle, back to the airport, and I flew back.
Wow, that's pretty dope, man. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, yeah,
yeah,
they're very intense, man. Like, people were calling them brutal progressive rock. Like, I remember hearing them some years back, and I was like, wow, these guys are sick, you know. And so when I
yep,
found out you collabed with them, I'm like, oh, heck yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Um, Another band, I think they're from Italy, Buñuel.
yeah, yeah.
How did that come about?
Same way that they had opened for us in Rome. One of the guys had opened for us in Rome, and then he approached me later about starting something. Like he had a very specific viewpoint. Like he wanted to do like American noise rock, you know. And this was Pier Paolo Capavia, who also introduced me to Abel Ferrara when I was trying to do some film thing, and it came together. It was, I mean, it was the narrow cast version of it was just so perfect. So we got our fourth record coming out on Skin Graft in May called Mansitude, and then we'll do a tour on that. The only North American show that we've done so far with Buñuel has been in Victoriaville, that festival up outside of Montreal, but we intend to do a bunch more U.S. shows. So and
That's dope.
the first three records are a trilogy. It starts with A Resting Place for Strangers. The second one was An Easy Way Out, and then the third is Killers Like Us. So yeah,
Sick, man. I'm digging the stuff that I heard.
yeah.
Um, there's here's another question, music related. How did you get into martial arts, and like, what made you go more to jiu-jitsu as far as like
Uh,
what? I'm
Bruce
just
Lee.
curious.
Bruce Lee, Five
Yeah.
Fingers of Death, and Enter the Dragon, or even beyond that, Green Hornet got me into martial arts. Plus, having a loud mouth, and then being in Brooklyn when all the Vietnam vets came back, and the whole tone and the timbre of the city changed, and it became kind of a dangerous place. It seemed like it made a lot of sense to me to do martial arts. And then, of course, I was watching the first UFC. And I was like, I'd already known about the Gracie challenge, that anybody could challenge a Gracie, and I'd heard about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and started taking it right after the first UFC #1. They didn't have a name for it. They called it combat wrestling at the time that I was taking it, and then I switched over to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. 12 years straight with the same coach now, and that's how long it took me to get my black belt. So I'm currently in great physical pain right now
Oh, wow.
because I picked up a piece of paper on the floor and I tweaked my back. Not from
Ooh.
not from training 7 days a week, not from doing CrossFit so I can train, but from bending on the floor and keeping paper up. Actually, I guess because having a 3-year-old around the house too.
Oh man.
Speaking of which, I got like 3 minutes.
All right, man. Well, shoot. I was gonna, man,
The
dude.
memoir.
I don't
Ask me
want to.
about the memoir.
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask. Thank you. I meant to actually ask that. So, well, you just released a new book, which is a memoir. about your life. It's called Walking Across. Oh man,
Walk across
walking
dirty
across
water
dirty water.
and
I
straighten
had
them.
to,
Do what you got to do. So
um,
walk across dirty water and straighten the murderer's row. That's it. That's it. Feral House Press. Yeah, you should buy it. It's a great memoir, and I was all panicked about it because I didn't want to get into the Oxbow degeneracy. And they said, no, stop before you get there. Just go birth to 27 and the creation of Oxbow. I go, perfect. I'll do that. So that's what I did.
yeah, man. I'm so sorry I didn't ask that first. I got so. This is amazing just to even interview you, man. I've got like, but yeah, I meant to ask that. You know,
Yeah.
like I seriously, I have it on my notes, and I'm like, how can I? Thanks for reminding me. And where could we get it? Where could we get it? Is it on Amazon or
It's
like
on,
you have any other
it's on
site?
Amazon. But if you hate going to Amazon to get it, you should go to Feral House. They have it on their site with a special gift, special sexy gift that I included for the first 100 books bought from Feral House directly. Or you could go to bookshop, goodbookshop.org, or or something like that. Any of those do. So
Man, man, I really appreciate it, man. And seriously, you guys, go out and get this book. I actually have an advertisement for it on my page. Thank you
thank
for even
you,
like,
thank you. That's so
yeah,
cool. That's so cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
I had to put it out. And it's funny. Look at the likes on there, man. One of really cool artists, Peppermint Raygon, was like really excited to see that you put that out. You check out her art. She's awesome.
Okay. All right. I will
Um,
do it. Yeah, I know. Hanif from the New York Times just sent me a nice sentence on it. I was like, man, that's so cool. I was like, I like when people who I like are liking the stuff I do. That's really cool. So,
man, anything in the works, like, because it seems like you're doing so much anyway, no matter what.
well,
Like anything.
we just finished shows in the Northeast. We finished shows on from Vancouver to Scottsdale. So we're going to work on the Midwest and the American South to finish off the states for the Oxbow record. And we have a video for every song coming out. Then we're going to have a video diary when all is said and done. Then in May, Boonwell comes out with Mansitude, and between and around all of that, come on, kid. Between and around all of that, we got book tours. So the likelihood that you'll see me in your town on a book tour is greater than that you're going to see me in short order with the band, because we just did like 18 shows in Europe, 6 or 7 down the West Coast, and then 3 Northeast. So we got a pretty heavy dance card up between now and then. So.
Well, man, any words of wisdom you want to leave with us? I always ask this at the end of
I usually sometimes people ask me to sign their books, and I put a little bit of doggerel in it. But it's more true now than ever. Don't die. That's what I say. Don't
Love
die.
that.
And then when Drew Stone had me on the Hardcore Chronicles, and he said, "Oh, look who's in the show! Look who's in the show!
The
Look,
little
kid!
one. What's up, little one?
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah."
little one.
Uh, and he said, any words of wisdom at the end, and I was like, yeah. When I look back at my life, I look at my time between 18 and 21 as being distinctly underproductive. So you get out there. Don't let your meat loaf. You gotta produce. I mean, if I was working at 18 the way I'm working now, I guarantee you things around here would look a lot different. I'd be sitting at my sun-dappled, Cape Cod estate right now, given the level of energy I have. So.
Man, dude, I really appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot. You
Thanks for
guys,
having me.
oh man, it's an honor. Black History Rock and Roll Month featuring the legendary Eugene Robinson. And go and check out that book. I'm telling you guys, man, I have it on my page. It's on my page, y'all. Look at that.
And you should know, and people should know that you bought it. I didn't even send it to you for free, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna buy it actually. I'm just advertising it, but I'm gonna buy it for sure.
Okay. So you haven't bought it. Okay, all right.
No, I'm gonna buy it. I've been putting it up though. I put it up just sort of as an
Okay,
advertisement on my page.
all right.
You know. So thanks a lot, man, and thanks again. Like seriously, oh, this
No,
is an
no.
honor, man.
Thanks for having me. If there's, I don't know how this thing works because I also said the internet would never make it. So there is that. So I'd already lived through CB radios. I thought it was just like a nice flash in the pan, you know. So if there's a way for me to send the link after it's reviewable again afterward, let me know because I don't know this off the top
Most
of my
def,
head. Okay.
most def,
All right.
man.
All right. All
Thank
right.
you.
All
Thanks a
right.
lot,
I'm
man.
glad we finally
Seriously.
had it happen. All right. Thanks. The bumps in the
Yes,
beginning, we made it. We made it. All right, man.
we did it.
Say goodbye, kid.
Take it easy, little one.
We'll see you. Bye bye. Bye.
See ya. Peace.
Bye.